The house listens. By the time Daniel realized the walls were breathing, it was already too late to leave. The house sat at the edge of the cliffs like it had been placed there by mistake, leaning toward the sea as if it longed to fall in. The paint, what was left of it, peeled in curling sheets the color of bone, and the slate roof sagged in the middle like an old man's back. Daniel told himself it was a steal. 4 bedrooms, a walled garden, and a view of the ocean for less than half of what they'd pay in the city. The agent had muttered something about long vacancy and motivated sale, but Daniel wasn't the kind of man who believed in curses. Mara wasn't convinced. She stood by the gate that first afternoon, arms wrapped tight around herself despite the muggy air. The ocean wind tangled her hair, pulling strands across her pale face. "It smells like rot," she said, not moving toward the door. Daniel inhaled. There was salt in the air, yes, and something musty, mildew maybe. "It's old wood," he said, trying to sound upbeat. "Give it a week with the windows open." But when he pushed the door open, the smell grew heavier, clinging to the back of his throat. The hallway was long and narrow, paneled in dark wood that drank in the light. The floorboards flexed slightly under his feet, as though he were walking across something soft. Mara trailed behind him without taking off her coat. They unpacked in silence. Every room seemed to have corners that caught the shadows and held them, places where the daylight bent oddly. The wallpaper in the upstairs hallway was faded, patterned with tiny repeating flowers whose petals had all browned with age. He ran his hand over one wall absently and jerked it back. It was warm, faintly like a living thing. That night he woke to the sound of whispering. At first he thought it was the wind funneling through some hidden crack. But the voice was low and rhythmic, like someone speaking through a door. He sat up, listening hard, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. The sound was coming from the wall behind the bed. "Mara?" he whispered, but she was asleep beside him, her breathing deep. He leaned closer, pressing his ear to the plaster. The voice was just at the edge of clarity. He couldn't make out the words, but there was something strangely familiar in the tone, a cadence that sent an electric crawl up his spine. It stopped suddenly, and in the abrupt silence, Daniel realized he'd been holding his breath. In the morning he decided not to mention it. Mara was already skittish enough. By the third night, Mara seemed more restless. She stood at the kitchen sink long after dinner, staring out at the overgrown garden where the grass swayed under the moonlight. "There's someone outside," she murmured without looking at him. Daniel joined her at the window. The garden was empty. "It's just the wind," he said, though he didn't entirely believe it. Her eyes flicked toward the wall beside the window. "No," she said softly. "Not outside." They argued about it the next day. Daniel told her she was hearing the house settling. She told him not everything could be explained away by pipes and wind. "I feel like it's watching us," she said. "Like it's paying attention." He laughed, but it was hollow, a reflex more than amusement. "It's a house, Mara. It's wood and plaster." That night, Daniel stayed up late in the living room reading. The old grandfather clock in the corner ticked in uneven intervals, sometimes pausing entirely, as though deciding whether to keep going. Around midnight he heard it again, that whispering. This time from the far wall near the staircase. It was clearer now. Not words exactly, but syllables, the rise and fall of a voice speaking to someone very close by. He found himself standing, crossing the room slowly, heart hammering as he pressed his palm against the paneling. Warm again. A faint vibration tickled his fingertips, as though something moved deep inside. On the 5th day, Mara called for him from upstairs, her voice sharp. When he reached the bedroom, she was kneeling by the skirting board, a small jagged crack in the wall just inches from her face. "Put your hand here," she said. He crouched down. Through the crack he saw only darkness, but it wasn't the flat black of an empty space. It had depth, and something in it seemed to swell and recede, almost imperceptibly. He reached out and touched the plaster around the gap. It was warm, no hot, and damp like skin after a bath. Daniel pulled his hand back quickly, wiping it on his jeans. "Probably moisture in the wall," he muttered. "We'll have to seal it." Mara didn't answer. She was staring into the crack, her lips parted slightly as though she were listening. That evening, while Daniel stood outside taking a call from his brother, Mara stayed upstairs. The sky was the color of slate, the ocean pounding below the cliffs, gulls wheeling in agitated circles. When Daniel came back in, the house felt different, still and heavy as if it were holding its breath. He climbed the stairs. The bedroom door was ajar. "Mara?" No answer. He stepped inside. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, head tilted toward the wall. Her eyes were wide, glassy, fixed on something unseen. "It's him," she said softly, almost reverently. "Who?" Daniel asked, stepping closer. Her gaze didn't leave the wall. "Our son." Daniel froze. His chest tightened. "Mara?" She turned to him then, tears streaking her cheeks. "He's in there, Daniel. He's talking to me." A sound broke the silence, a low, deliberate knock from inside the wall. "What?" Twice. Then a pause. Daniel's mouth went dry. A child's voice, faint but unmistakable, whispered through the plaster. "Mama?" Daniel's first thought was that he was dreaming, that the tension between him and Mara, the house, the move, the miscarriage, had finally twisted itself into some waking nightmare. But the sound had been too clear, too sharp. "Mara, listen to me," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "That's not." "It is," she cut in, her eyes never leaving the wall. "You heard it too." The silence that followed was somehow worse than the knock. The air between them felt charged, the hairs on Daniel's arms prickling. "We need to leave," he said. Her lips curved in a faint, almost blissful smile. "I can't. He needs me." That night they didn't speak. Daniel lay awake, every muscle tense, listening. At some point, the whispering returned, not from the bedroom wall this time, but from multiple places at once. Faint, overlapping voices, weaving in and out of each other like a chorus. He couldn't tell what they were saying, but his name slipped through once, clear as glass. "Daniel?" The next morning Mara was gone. Not from the house. She was in the kitchen, staring at the wall as she buttered toast she never ate. He tried to talk her into a walk through town. She refused. So he went alone, pacing the damp streets until he found the tiny corner store. The man behind the counter was old enough to seem like part of the furniture. "You're in the White House by the cliffs," the man said without looking up from his paper. Daniel nodded. "We moved in last week." The man's mouth tightened. "You won't be there long." Daniel waited for more, but the man just folded the paper slowly. "That place keeps people," he said finally. "Takes them apart. Leaves bits behind." Daniel gave a short laugh. "You mean they don't move out with all their stuff?" The old man's eyes lifted, pinning him. "Not stuff." Back home, the air felt heavier than when he'd left. Mara was upstairs. He found her kneeling again by the crack in the bedroom wall, whispering something he couldn't quite hear. Her hand rested against the plaster, fingers spread like she was holding someone's face. "Mara, please." She turned on him then, sudden and fierce. "You don't hear him? He's our son, Daniel. He's in pain. He needs me." Daniel felt the words dig into him, sharp with the memory they both carried. The ultrasound screen gone still, the nurse's voice quiet and careful. "It's not him," he said, and his own voice broke. But even as he spoke, something deep inside the wall shifted. The sound was sickening, a slow, wet slide like flesh against flesh. Then came the smell, coppery, sharp, mixed with something damp and ancient. Over the next 2 days, the house seemed to breathe around them. The wallpaper along the upstairs hallway bubbled slightly, like something beneath it was swelling and pressing outward. In the nursery, a room they had kept closed since moving in, the air was warmer, humid. Daniel swore he saw the crib shift a few inches one morning, though no window was open. He tried to get Mara to leave. She refused. He threatened to go alone, but deep down he knew he wouldn't. That night the storm rolled in from the sea. The wind screamed along the cliffs, rain hammering the windows and sheets. The house groaned as though it were straining against the weather. Daniel woke to find Mara's side of the bed empty. A faint light glowed under the nursery door. He opened it to find her standing barefoot on the rug, her nightgown soaked to the knees though she hadn't been outside. Her hands were pressed against the far wall, forehead resting on the damp plaster. "Mara," he said, stepping in. She didn't look back. "He's here. He's waiting for me." The wall beneath her palms began to ripple. The plaster thinned in spots, revealing the suggestion of shapes beneath, not flat, not painted, but pressed into the surface like something was trapped inside. Daniel's breath caught as he recognized the contours, faces. Dozens of them. Some were twisted in silent screams. Others stared blankly ahead. And in the space just in front of Mara's hands, a smaller face. Round cheeks. Closed eyes. Her voice cracked. "He's beautiful." "No." Daniel lunged forward, grabbing her shoulders. The wall pulsed, hot under his touch, and then it opened. Not like something breaking but like lips parting. A warm, wet darkness yawned inward, and before he could pull her back, the wall swallowed Mara whole. Daniel slammed his fists against the plaster, shouting her name. The surface sealed over instantly, smooth and unbroken except for the faint warmth that lingered. He searched for her until dawn, ripping away wallpaper, pounding on walls until his knuckles split. No trace. When the sun rose, the storm was gone. The sea stretched out, flat and glittering as though nothing had happened. Weeks later, Daniel is still there. The townspeople don't see him much. The old man at the store says he looks emptied out. At night, he sits in the bedroom, leaning against the wall. He talks to it, about his day, about the weather, about the ache in his chest. Some nights she whispers back. And on those nights, the walls are the warmest.